to episode 5 of Stringing Along. I'm Jim Donio.
And I'm Ronnie King.
We are so lucky to have the Kitchen Conciliary Cafe in Collingswood, New Jersey as our, very consistent, supportive sponsor so far every show this season. Angelo Lutz is going to be unveiling a new outdoor dining experience for the weeks leading up to and including the holidays, and we really hope you will pay them a visit. You'll enjoy some exceptional Italian cuisine. You know that's the case. We've been talking about that now for weeks. And the service. It's about the experience. Speaking of experiences, at the end of tonight's show, we'll be announcing how you can win a gift card to be used at the Kitchen Conciliary Cafe, compliments of Angelo Lutz. So stay tuned, means you got to watch through the whole show and you'll find out how you can have a chance to win. So, Ron, what are we doing tonight?
All right, so tonight, now we know the last couple of weeks it started getting cold out, but this week we're going to heat things up a little bit. And through the magic of string band mummery, the string bands have been kind enough to take us on some summer breeze tours down to the islands in the Caribbean and out to the South Pacific, to the Hawaiian Islands and Greater Polynesia. Where do you see these shows? They're really exciting and creative. So let's talk about some of the things that we have coming up along with this show. Here we have, we're really happy to have our guests, and I'm not going to tell you who they are right now. We're going to discuss that later. But we're thrilled to have these two gentlemen on. It's going to be an interesting conversation. So let's get started.
Now, wait, aren't we going to do, you mentioned Hawaii, Polynesia, you mentioned them. We're going to do Cuba as well, right? So
Cuba is Cuba is one of them, and incidentally, we'll see a band take us on a tour of Cuba a little bit.
Two bands.
Two bands take us on a tour of Cuba, and incidentally, a few bands, I think, and one for sure I know of, has been to Cuba. So in 1959, it was the end of, and I'm just going to refer to a couple notes that I have because I want to get this out right. Oh, by the way, a couple of people did ask me, Jim, and I got to get this out. They said, you're doing something with your mouth that is strange when you're sitting there. I am wearing Invisalign braces, and they are, it's a foreign thing in my mouth, and they're on my teeth, and so sometimes I slip up on words, and I probably would do that anyway. Back to my notes, because this is important. I want to get this right. So, in 1959, it was the end of the Fulgencio Batista regime on the island of Cuba. And what I'm talking about there is that if you remember the movie The Godfather 2, where Michael Corleone is with his brother Fredo in the celebration hall. They were celebrating New Year's, but really it was the fall of one regime moving into the regime of Fidel Castro. So for the celebration of Fidel Castro becoming the island nation's leader, they wanted to have a big celebration. They had big parades. And one of the string bands that I know of for sure was invited to go and parade was the South Philadelphia String Band. And I'm going to hold up a picture. I hope you can see it. It's black and white. It's printed on paper. So forgive me, but we'll see if we can get this in there really well for you to see. Jim, let me know when that's up there.
That's a big group. Of course, they're not in costume. They're standing outside of the plane.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a group. What's interesting is they're I'm going to say almost everyone is wearing a jacket, and most of them are wearing ties. So I don't necessarily think we'd see that today unless we were at the banquet. So
well, that's really cool. I mean, that look, we have several bands that have traveled literally all over the world. I've been very fortunate to be in the South Philadelphia String Band when they traveled to Germany. I was with the Quaker City String Band when they traveled to Italy. And Greater Kensington and Furco, I know for sure, and as well, maybe Fralinger have traveled as far as Hong Kong. So the string bands have been all over the place.
Yeah, yeah. Ireland is a big destination as
Yes,
well,
it
with
is.
Woodland and Quaker and others. So let's move to the first of tonight's 4 featured performances. So this band is going to take us on a delightful getaway to the islands of the Caribbean. It's the Greater Kensington String Band with its 1989 performance of Bien Caribbean.
Yeah, wait. Bien?
Wait, bien, like good.
No,
Bien.
no. Isn't it Bien Caribbean?
No, Bien Caribbean would be BEIN apostrophe. This is BIEN.
Did
So
you spell that?
BIEN, Bien
Oh,
Caribbean.
that's
It's
the way it was
good,
written?
it's good Caribbean, good Caribbean, Bien Caribbean.
Wow. See, I know.
And if there's anybody out there from Greater Kensington who wants to correct us one way or the other, please let us know. But for now, let's take a look at the 1989 performance. So this was a really interesting year for Greater K. Um, as you saw in our first episode of the Amazing 80s. So 1988, they were coming off of their groundbreaking classical theme, Go for Baroque, that took first prize that year. Their captain, Joe Lippincott, was actually into the following year, into 88, was recovering from back surgery, and he had to bow out as the captain for the 1989 performance. So in his place, as you saw in the clip, this was the debut of Scott Moyer. So Scott would go on to officially succeed Joe, beginning the following. Actually, Joe came back for 90, and then Scott succeeded Joe in 1991. And so Scott was following in the footsteps of his uncle, Ron Moyer. And I think you can see, if you're really a fan of Greater K, Scott picked up where Ron left off, specifically in terms of back piece, headpiece, which, you know, I'm a big fan of. I miss them. I miss them. I miss them. But the Moyers were definitely those who had a reputation for spectacular ensembles. This would, I mean, it was Ron's trademark. I think it really became one of Scott's trademarks, and it would be the case for many parades to come. It was a really fun and entertaining performance. What did you think, Ron?
Well, first let's start with Scott. Scott is a really humble guy, really super nice. The Moyer family, can't say enough good about them. Steve Moyer and Jeff Moyer, who was the captain for a couple of years there as well. So you can see the family ties back to Uncle Ronnie Moyer, Eddie Moyer. I mean, just a great family from Greater Kensington. The music for this show, as you'll see with the other shows, steeped in percussion-heavy music. And this is the first time I recall, I mean, I don't know that it's ever happened before. It may have, but they had steel drum players. And I don't think I've ever heard that in a string band before. And
they would have to ask permission for that, because there are exceptions that bands have to apply for, exceptions if they're adding an instrument that's not part of the string band rules. I don't know if this was the very first, but we're going back, what, 31 years? So it may have been. It may have been.
Yeah, so one of those steel drum players was Dave Thomas, who was also the bell player for Greater Kensington for a number of years. And Dave is a good friend and did an excellent job. Him and I don't know the other gentleman's name, I apologize, but they really did a great job. This is another genre of themes, if you will, that are bursting with color and energy. Mm-hmm. As far as Greater Kensington's costumes were concerned, a lot of those guys had back pieces on, right? I mean, that's when we were still wearing, you know, now I think at this point we're down to around 16 to 24 back pieces per band, with a bigger pit band and a little bit larger of a dancing corps. Mm-hmm. But the costume itself, my father was still, these costumes were made at Philadelphia Costume. My father was working at Philadelphia Costume. He said, I don't know what Greater Kensington is doing this year, but their costumes are really hideous. And I'm like, really? They're hideous? I mean, that's a strong word. He said, yeah, I can't make out what these costumes, one leg is bare, one leg has stripes on it. I have no idea. But when he saw it, after parade day, saw it on TV, he said, oh my God, that really looks great.
Yeah. Then he got it. Then he got it.
And then he got it. So this theme was a lot of fun. Again, take a look at the back pieces, because when we get to other themes, the back pieces seem to mysteriously disappear.
Yeah.
But what you'll hear in common with them is the percussion. So
that'll definitely be a thread that will go through the rest of these island themes. So let's move on to the next island hopping band for tonight. So they're going to transport us to our 50th state of Hawaii. It's the 2008 Quaker City String Band, with its second prize winning performance of Adventures in Paradise. So this was another pivotal year captain-wise. It was sadly, the final strut as a captain for the iconic ambassador. We've talked about him, several times before already on this show. How can we not? He's just a common thread through so much of the history of mummers and string bands. Of course, I'm talking about the leader of the group, Bob Shannon Jr. So in this performance, his final performance as captain, he was portraying the legendary king, King Kamehameha. You also saw, as we were just talking about when we were talking about Greater K, so by 2008, most bands had reduced, as Ron was saying, but not yet completely abandoned having a majority of the band members wearing back pieces. So the 10, at this point in the Quaker City performance, there's 10. They're not the biggest back pieces, but they're still back pieces. And then you can start to see, I mean, Greater Kensington had done it, but Quaker City does it, I think, even more, and then it will become a trend in many of the bands. You start to see the movement of members in either smaller headpieces or no headpieces doing these like breathlessly intricate formations, moving in and out of the performance. This really became a hallmark, particularly of Quaker City. But I've got to say, you know, this is an opinion show, so I've got to say, I miss the feathers. I miss the spectacle. I miss the large aha, wow moments of Captain's back pieces. Not that I'm not wowed by Captain's, you know, standing on top of things and being revealed inside of things. That's all very innovative and creative, but I miss the back pieces. I miss the spectacle. How about you, Ron?
Yeah, and look, we're not alone. We are not alone in that sentiment. I miss watching a string band come down the street, back pieces all the way across, the beautiful plumage, the different ideas that bands would come up with for back pieces. It was really quite something to see. And so now, as far as this Quaker City theme, I was a part of this organization then. I performed in this show. It was to me, it was one of my favorite shows to ever have performed in. And I think it's one of the prettiest shows as far as the costuming was concerned. Russ Fama was the designer on this, and these costumes were designed not by just coming up with something that you think looks Polynesian or Hawaiian, but these are studied costuming. That's where the designs came from. He really did his homework on traditional pieces and everything like that. What Quaker City had been doing since, I want to go back to 2003, whenever, and it might even be before that, but that's to my knowledge because that's when I joined the organization. Quaker City does a very good job of when they do something that is ethnic in nature, they are studying that theme to ensure that they don't do things that could be offensive. And because we don't ever want to do that, we really don't. I mean, mummers by nature are minds and you know, of mirth and merriment, and they, in ancient times, they mocked people, and we don't do that anymore, especially with themes of an ethnic nature, as I said.
Yeah.
Now, this theme is also, from beginning to end, non-stop movement. Jimmy Rivell Jr. was the drill master of the band, and he had been this probably his fourth year drilling the band. Maybe even a little bit longer, but I think it was his fourth or fifth year. This to me was his finest production. I mean, this was just absolutely off the hook. And as Jim mentions, the constant movement and formations. Toward the end, you see the pit band start to switch costumes, and they're almost doing this vortex, this circle back in the middle. It's actually called, I think it's a drum corps thing. I would have to ask Johnny Keene from Quaker because he knows. I think it's called the Hurricane. And
I do. I think you're right.
What better theme to do it in than when you're doing a Polynesian thing, you're portraying water, fire, the volcano. Pay attention to all the props back there. Even though those back pieces are beautiful pieces, the blue plumage on them with the tikis on the back.
Yeah.
The props are really interactive in this theme, where the pineapples come forward with Pineapple Princess. Again, if I didn't mention the percussion in this theme, Jimmy Muller Jr., who is one of the best string band drummers ever. He's just great to play under him, carrying the band. To me, a drummer's everything in the band. If your drummers aren't like really great, it's not as easy, but he is. And one of the percussion instruments used was like this log to emulate wooden percussion that you would find in the Hawaiian Islands. And I think he made it himself. I'm pretty sure he did. He actually carved it himself.
Wow.
And every time
That's dedication.
anytime we're talking about percussion, always think of the name Jimmy Quayle. Now, Quayle's easy, right? Because there's 13 of them, plus Mr. and Mrs. Quayle at one time. But Jimmy Quayle is a drum guru. And when bands need their help with doing authentic percussion for whatever theme it is that they're doing that requires it, Jimmy's usually the guy that gets the call. And this is an excellent theme. I really enjoy being a part of it.
Yeah. As you were, talking, you're touching on, with themes like these island themes, and we will be doing shows on other types of ethnic or geographical themes. Tapping into the cultural touch points and nuances are really important. And I think we saw that absolutely with Greater K and with Quaker. So I guess we can say we have fans now of this show. We have actually several thousand views of our first 4 shows, which we're very grateful for. So some of the things that we're hearing are that they like when we insert these little trivia points. So I will insert one right now. So by 2008, okay, because that's the theme we're talking about for for Quaker City. But Fralinger, so this was during their 8-peat. So they had won 6 in a row, okay, by 2008. Quaker had finished in 2nd place in the runner-up slot in all 6 of those years. Okay, now here's the trivia point. The top 5 bands, okay, for 2008, 2009 finished in the exact same order. Now, I just really stumbled upon this today. I'm going to have to go back and do some homework, see if it's the only time in 120 years where the exact order of finish, the top 5 bands were the same. But it certainly was the case for 2008 and 2009, which have the additional little factoid of 2008 was the final appearance as captain of Quaker by Bob Shannon Jr. 2009, as we learned a few weeks ago with our special guest from Fralinger, 2009 was the last captain's performance of Bill Bowen Jr. So now we've been to the Caribbean and we've been to Hawaii. Now we're going to take two trips to the island of Cuba. This is somewhere U.S. residents weren't even able now in modern times to travel to until very recently. So the first performance we're going to look at is from 2011. It is the Avalon String Band finishing in 5th place by celebrating a holiday in Havana. so this was such a colorful and high energy show. As Ron was saying, these island themes just seem to have that as kind of a built-in quality. Uh, the Cuban themes, and there have been several. We are going to see a second one that's going to be a lead into our very special guests tonight. So some of them have been inspired by classic black and white, probably some would say the all-time #1 sitcom of all time, I Love Lucy, which was in a way that the Cuban culture, Cuban music, Cuban instrumentation, that's how a lot of us were introduced to Cuba and introduced to Cuban music and performances because of, Ricky Ricardo, Lucy's husband. So in this particular year, the 2011 theme with Avalon, so this was led by Captain Jack He Jr. And we are going to talk more about the theme. Ron's going to tell us, some interesting points about the performance. But before we continue with that, we do want to extend our best wishes right now on behalf of the entire Mummers and String Band community to Jack's dad. Jack's dad, also popular and beloved string band captain in his own right, Jack He Sr. Jack is in the hospital right now. We are all sending out our most heartfelt prayers for a speedy and a full recovery. We love you, Jack, and we're all thinking of you. So Ron, let's hear your thoughts about Holiday in Havana.
Holiday in Havana. Well, let's talk about one of the participants. Actually, it's not one of the participants, it's a couple of them that come from another prominent Mummers family. And this is where we're going with this. We want to talk about all these families and some of the individuals who really make their mark on the hobby, on the division, and on their own, in their own organization. So this year here is performing with the band is Jerry Crompton. And Jerry Crompton, longtime member of Avalon, prior to that, a member of FERCO for a long time. And his sons also in the band in a very prominent way, either drilling the band or arranging music. Another great family. This theme, again, it offers everything that the other themes do. It's just a ton of energy, beautiful coloring. It's slightly different from what you'll see on the other bands, but I mean that's the big hook on it. When people are when theme committees are sitting in their clubs deciding what to do, they usually want to go with something that's very high energy, very exciting, very colorful, very vibrant, and these themes fall right into that category. Now, you'll notice even when they slow down to play, there's a song that they play somewhere in the middle. Again, I'm going to reference The Godfather because I believe that this song, you also hear that piece of music in The Godfather, in the Cuban section of Godfather 2. They play that song. It's very cool, but they don't let the tempo come far off the mark. It's played in a way where, maybe the horn section gets a little break from all the movement and playing at the same time, but not too much of one because they go right back into it. And I believe their finale song might have been El Cumbachero, which is a very common song played with Latin American themes, with these Caribbean themes. I think translated, it means we have fun. That's what El Cumbachero means. And there is no doubt when you watch Jack He perform, he worked for that second prize very hard. I mean, he was all over the place. He did an excellent job, and how he kept it up at that pace for 4.5 minutes is beyond me.
Yeah. So I'd like to make a couple of observations, take us just back for a moment, because it'll be a little bit of a foreshadowing of at least of our guests who are coming up and some of the conversation we're going to have with them. So the string bands, the association string bands in particular,
Is this about bananas? Is this the talk about bananas?
Well, I'm going to touch on that, but I'm
Okay.
talking about in many types of themes, but particularly these themes, the Hawaiian theme with Quaker, and now this Cuban theme, and in subsequent themes, there are times where portraying a female character is integral to the story, to the show, to the theme. And the majority of the bands are, male only bands, going back certainly to the earlier performances, decades ago, for sure. Dick Crean broke the barrier in 1975 with the first two young women who marched with them. But the very traditional string bands, the association traditional string bands, maybe have kind of broken that barrier with a handful of exceptions. So when they weren't going to do that, when they weren't going to have females portraying female characters, they would find ways to depict those characters with the members of the band. So in Quaker's Hawaiian theme, we saw, these little ingenious ways of showing hula girls attached on some sort of device, or we see more exaggerated costuming with wigs and masks so that we introduce a female character. In this Havana, holiday in Havana, Avalon had this, pretty ingenious way of introducing a female component. They had these, handheld props that were bananas, which were kind of an appropriate element for the holiday in Havana. And then they literally peel the banana, and inside is a dance partner, a female dance partner, obviously a doll, so that they can introduce that component to it as well. And this influences the choreography. It embellishes, it rounds out the performances. And, there's no right or wrong way to do it. All different bands have chosen different ways to incorporate this. And as I said, this is a little bit of a foreshadowing of what's coming up actually very shortly in the show with our guests.
Yeah, and incidentally, when Jim's talking about when women started to become part of the playing body of the band, prior to that, women were always involved in more of an auxiliary capacity, helping to make costumes, helping with makeup. I remember our house being filled with satin fabric and sequin, and some of this stuff was done in our homes. And so as time goes on, like Jim says, a majority of the bands were still female. Now we're even up. There are 8 bands, there's 16 bands total now. There are 8 bands that are all male organizations and 8 that are co-ed. So, and the co-ed bands, we're going to talk about them in a later program. There are a couple of them that have been very, very successful with enormous talent amongst the women in those clubs. So take a look for that coming at you soon.
Absolutely. So we're going to take a little short break now. And when we come back, we will have our special guests for this evening. Now it's our pleasure to introduce our 2 special guests tonight. They are truly a dynamic duo, and Ron and I have known the elder George Balzer III for a really long time. We have each marched with George in Hegeman and Quaker City string bands, and we'll definitely be reminiscing about some of those moments. And the younger George IV, he took his place in front of the Woodland String Band for the first time in 2020, and he already established himself first time out as a prize-winning captain. So welcome to the 2 Georges. Say hi.
How you doing, Jimmy? Glad to be here. It's been fun watching on the other episodes, reminiscing through the years, the 80s, Billy, Tom King, America. you know, they were all nice episodes. Good history. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you. We're glad to have you both here. And young George, have you watched the show?
Yeah, so I just finished the last episode yesterday with Tommy King, and it's been awesome. It was pretty cool to hear the whole backstory on Bill Bowen, and then obviously the latest episode with the animal themes. That was a cool little twist off episode already on episode 4, and it's been awesome. I couldn't imagine. I was very surprised to get the call this past week. It seems like you said, you know so much about history, and I've only been a part of it for so long, so it's cool to be a part of this.
Well, you're a big part of the reason that this is going to, hopefully we all hope and pray that this is going to continue moving on as a folk tradition. So, Ron, you want to do the intro for this great performance?
It's my job to do the intro. Okay, so listen, we're going to have fun with you guys for a few minutes and get into a lot of discussion. As some people may know, I know that George III does know that he's one of my best friends in Mummers of all times. He's just a fantastic guy. And George IV, what can you say? Well, we'll say it after we take another trip down to Cuba. Compliments of the Woodland String Band, finishing 4th with their theme, Caliente in Cuba.
Now, this was a terrific, high energy performance from start to finish. Now, so we've got to go back to rehearsing on the Parkway on Kennedy Boulevard the morning of January 1st, 2020. We've got to go back to that first. And Ron and Stacy and I are standing shoulder to shoulder, and we're watching probably one of the first, if not the first, run through of the show, of the performance. And we immediately sense the frustration in young George, because it's his first time and he wants it to be perfect, and he's having some issues with some of his costume components, but they go through it the first time. And Ron, Stacy, and I just look at each other, and I say, he's got it. Okay? There's an it factor that it's not something that is learned. It's you've got to have it as part of you. You have that showman gene. Not everyone has it, and there's been many good captains that had beautiful suits and gave it their all, but they just didn't have that added quality. And we're standing there and we're thinking and we're saying, wow, talk about the apple not falling far from the tree. Here's the son of the guy who some would say perhaps holds the record for portraying the most female characters in string bands through the years. And here you are starting out, as Carmen Miranda at the very beginning of the show. And I think for me and for the three of us, there was something comforting about that. It was like, this is legacy. This is taking something from the tradition of your dad, and executing that. So what was it like for you, taking over for someone like Shaggy, Tom Robeson, who was, an exceptional captain and a really good person. That's not an easy task. You'd been a dancer in the band, but how are you feeling? How are you feeling taking on this role, and how are you feeling that morning when we're watching you and we're looking at each other and saying, he's got it? How are you feeling?
So Shaggy, like you said, it's tough to take over for somebody like that. He's a very I would say polarizing person around the clubhouse. He's always the guy making the jokes. He's always the center of attention, just because we all loved him so much, and he was the leader. So, I mean, I went over to the band when I was 13 years old, and he kind of was like a big brother to me then. And all the way through to me becoming captain, I tried to learn every single thing I could from him. I mean, I grew up behind a guy like Bob Shannon, and as soon as I went over to Woodland, boom, Shaggy didn't matter. Shaggy was the guy, and he was that good. And along the way, he just became a better and better dancer and showman. He joked every year since the year I got over there, oh, I'm done. And he just got better and better. And it just showed me how much more we can all grow if we just keep learning and keep open-minded and keep working hard. Mm-hmm. But like going over to New Year's Day, that morning was something else, to say the least. I was, like you said, I was so nervous and excited all at once, and just wanted everything to go right in a theme that we jammed so much into, because it needed it. I mean, you seen the final product at the judges stand, it all worked out. But leading up to that, man, I mean, you guys could even say yourself, you've seen it, whether it was the costume change not working or the prop not making it out because the street's a little smaller where we were rehearsing. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Things just weren't going. And if I had to come 40 feet out, 50 feet out to make my entrance into that banjo solo dance, or go out there without a hat on, or without this or that, like, we just try to make it work every time, because you never know what's going to go wrong at the judges. Mm-hmm. And that was like the one thing I kind of took out of that. But luckily enough, when we got to the judges, the costume change worked and the prop made it out. So everything kind of cleared up.
Mm-hmm. Now, Elder George yeah. III. So I remember coming up to you and erroneously assuming that you would still be with South Philly. And you said to me, no, no, no. I made a promise to myself that if my son was ever going to be the captain of Woodland String Band, that I would be marching behind him. What was that like? What was it like to be behind your son and seeing what an exceptional job he did?
It was honestly, I was nervous that for him. I mean, you want your son to do well. You want him to do, a great job, and he did. But I was nervous that everything would happen or this wouldn't happen or, the things that happened. And I made that promise to him that, hey, if you ever became captain, yes, I will come march behind you. And he did. And I told South Philly the next week after the elections, guys, I'm going over to Woodland, marching with my son.
So before the elections, George had told me prior to that was his intention to, if Georgie had won the election, that he would be going to Woodland to march behind his son. I got to tell you that's one of the nicest things I've ever heard, because coming from a family that was all over the place, we remained competitive against one another. We didn't go behind and march behind Bobby or behind Joey. We still stayed the bands that we were in and fought to the death on New Year's Day. That being said, George, you explained a little bit how you felt about George IV taking on the mantle and becoming captain. And but George IV, I got to ask you a question. How did your mom feel? Because she's from a Mummer family herself. I mean, Uncle Harry Brown Jr., Grandpa Harry. I mean, that's a prominent Mummers family as well. They all had to be proud of you, right?
Yeah. So one of my traditions, and I still kind of continued it this year, was I always would try to meet up with my uncle and my cousin and my pop-up that was in Quaker City, and say good luck to them every New Year's morning, where this year they had come down. My cousin came down and said good luck to me and everything, and I made sure to see them before we went. So yeah, it's always been competitive, but at the end of the day, like you said, we're all family. So it's been cool growing up, though, even with my dad being in South Philly when I was in Woodland for so long, and then having my cousins in Quaker City and my uncle that was in Furco. It was kind of cool for a little while to all be in the top bands fighting back and forth over and over again, and who would have bragging rights every year. Yeah. So
that's really cool. And George, when I think of you, I mean, I just think of the years that we spent together in Quaker. We had so much fun. It was crazy. But I want to go back even further than that. And if you can just touch upon it before we start with the first year that Jim had referenced. How did you get into string bands? Like, how did this start for you?
I played drums. I played drums, and I started with Trilby. My first year up the street with Trilby was, I believe, 80. It was right after it was a good Moonlight Serenade or something like that.
Yeah, I believe something like that. Yeah.
I was always in Mummers, and I played instrument. A friend of mine was in there. I went there for a couple of years, and then joined Hegeman.
Then you came to us. You came to Hegeman right after that. So you weren't in. Were you in George M in 81?
No, I joined the following year.
Okay, so you came in 81 in preparation for 82, which was Showtime at the Copacabana.
Yes.
I know we have a photo of that's going to come up with, I guess that was your first time, being the person, one of the two people, you and Bob Bacon Sr. were our showgirls, our Copacabana showgirls. And Bob's passed on, and he was such an amazing person. I remember him, I remember the two of you, I had designed the costumes, and Bob came over after the end of the parade had ended, and we were at, the end of the parade, saying this was the most fun, the most comfortable costume and the most fun he ever had. And I do remember him saying the only challenge he had that day was making sure that George kept his knees together when you would go down and you would be doing the shimmy and your knees would spread open. If anybody watches the performance, so it isn't perfect.
I'm going to go back and watch it. I want to see it.
Yeah, there's some not quite feminine moves there. That was 82. That was 82, and then 83. You know, you knew I was putting together the On Stage in the Big Apple. You were obviously excited to be part of that, and so was Bob again. And Bob was cast in the role of Mame, and you were cast in the role of Dolly Levi from Hello Dolly, and we've got a picture of that that's going to come up as well.
That's hot.
So, I'm sorry?
That's hot.
Yeah. For me, just, I love you and we've been friends for like all these decades, but you're just always going to be forever frozen in my memory for those years. Cause then I left the band to do the TV work. So you continued your cross-dressing female roles. And so you were then also a flapper in Roar 20's Roar
Yep.
in 1986. So those are three that I know. Those are three that I know of. As you look back, George IV, I mean, you were very little, if even born during those years, probably weren't born yet during those performances.
No, he wasn't born in those years.
You became familiar. You saw them, right? You saw pictures of them. You saw them on TV. And, what did you think as you were kind of learning about the Mummers and string bands and, your dad in these roles?
So as he always says he said earlier that Ronnie knows all his years as a female. I just know growing up around Ronnie would always joke about it. And even this year, like you said, going from female to male for myself, it was brought up quite a few times. But I mean, it's just something like that. I don't know, like you said, maybe he passed it on to me and helped me with the way I am as a dancer or showman or anything like that. It kind of maybe gave me the ability to be a little bit better at being a showman and filling into the role. Cause I always kind of danced and did different things outside of Mummers when I was little. And to me, that's what your job, you know what I mean? Your job as the entertainer is to go out there and fill that role. Kind of like you talked about with Bill Bowen 2 weeks ago, fill it, bring high energy and sell that character. Yeah. And that's what my dad always did as that female.
That's exactly the case. And, kudos to you, George III, because, I worked with you and helped choreograph you. And, I mean, let's just be honest. I mean, you were like a wild man during those years. I mean, personally, you were a wild man during those years. And there's many stories about those, but they're not part of this show. But when it came to, like your son was saying, when it came to being serious and portraying those characters and taking advice and taking guidance from me, from Joe Walters, who choreographed and did the drill for the Copacabana, you were always, and Ron and I were talking about this as we were preparing for the show tonight, what I would say about you in your Mummers string band career, you're all in. When you are in it, you are in it. You're in it to be the character. You're in it to play your instrument. You're in it to win. But if you don't win, you gave it. And like, where did that come from? Like, was the George II or George I in the Mummers? I never asked you that.
No, my dad got involved because of me. He was from down around 2nd Street, but I'm competitive at whatever I do, Jim. If you name it, I'm competitive. So it's just the way I am. I'm built, I'm competitive no matter what I do. So I think that's kind of what helped in me through that. It's just something I bring to the table. That way.
So here's a few other things that I personally know about George. First of all, this is a guy who has at one time worked 2 full-time jobs and still made all this time for his family in a way that a family is supposed to be, traditionally speaking, right? And he still gave string band full effort. George is not just a normal mom. To me, he goes above and beyond. And it's not just because I'm friends with George, and it's true, we are. We were very close, and I like to think that we still are. We're just separated by time and space sometimes. But Georgie Balzer is also a master prop builder. This guy is a competitor. He don't play at his instrument. He plays his instrument. He really works hard to be able to play just as well as the next guy in line. I mean, we would sit for hours and practice together, practice our solos and everything like that, because that's how much it means to him to be that good. And believe me, it pays off. He is also, and you can correct me, George, if I'm wrong. I'm not trying to like butter you up or anything. You know I don't have to do that. He's also on the board of directors of Mummers Against Cancer. Are you still on with that?
Yeah, I'm chairman of the board, yes.
Yes.
Okay. So
he's
in
on
my estimation, not just because he's my friend and because Georgie is a Hall of Fame member already in my book, and he should find himself there fairly soon. Along with that, I just want to step back and talk about the performer in Georgie. It doesn't end in the club, and it doesn't end at rehearsals. I have marched in parades with this guy where you just cannot slow him down in just a simple parade. He's an extrovert to the extent where he'll leave line. He breaks ranks. He don't care. I'm going to go to the crowd. This is Georgie speaking. I'm going to go to the crowd because that's who's here to see us. And I'm going to take pictures with them. I'm going to shake hands. I'm going to kiss babies if I can. You know, he's just that way. And I see Georgie in a course of like just a simple 4th of July parade or a Memorial Day parade, light up people on the sides of the parade route, because he's really, like you said, when he's in it, he is in it. Now it looks as though he passed that to Georgie the Fourth. And I see George, when I seen him perform, I was shaking my head. I said, I can't believe this guy's incredible. This is going to be a lot of fun. I mean, when Stacy and I just gushing, and believe me, it wasn't fake, George, young Georgie. We've been doing this all our lives, and we can see these things, like Jim likes to use the term, these things are being, foreshadowed. And I see when we can get this thing back online the way it's supposed to be, I see a very long and great successful career for you in front of the Woodland String Band. And boy, oh boy, what a legacy you've been handed by just your father. I mean, it's just, look, he's an incredible guy, and you come from a great Mummers family, and you should be very proud.
Yeah, family is really critical. We could spend a lot longer with you guys, but we're coming to a conclusion shortly. I want to say two things real quick. Family is really important, and I know we kind of quickly glossed over Adventures in Paradise, the Quaker theme. I know we've got a photo of George with his oldest, Ashley, so we're gonna make sure we pop that up on the screen as well to remember that time. And I also skipped over when I was drill master for Hegeman for 1 year, 1984, for Dante's Dancing Inferno. So George and I had that experience of actually dancing together, and that was an experience. It was one of the first years with a big prop, with a big piece of scenery, big devil's face. But anyway, so as we bring this to a close, Fathers and Sons is a hallmark of the Mummers, hallmark of string bands, and it's really special that you guys have shared this experience and have had this opportunity, this moment We don't know what's going to happen going forward. How do you both feel? How are you feeling right now, George the Fourth? You had this moment, this experience, and now having it a second or a third time is kind of on hold. How are you feeling about that?
Well, I think just like the rest of us, we're all kind of excited to get back out there, not knowing when it's going to be, hoping that it's next year, and hoping that nothing puts that on hold. But it's just, we got to prove myself that much more in my mind and do everything I can to help us be the best we can be. Obviously, we got fourth this year, which is great, and we're happy with that. But we won. We're shooting for the stars, just like everyone else. Every single year, we're hoping to win, and we're working so much towards our theme we put in, and hoping that everything can go great in 2022. Hopefully,
2022. And George the Third. So, New Year's night, 2020, has to become a bittersweet moment for you. Obviously the sweet is being behind your son. Your son gets a prize in his first year. The band finishes fourth, but the band that you left wins first prize in a clean sweep. And I know you, so I know. Huh?
How many does he need?
I know you, George, and I know, that's not the most important thing. The most important thing was being behind George the Fourth, but I should add in here that George the Third and I are both we're on the board of the Palandro Ferry Memorial Foundation. I'm the publicity director. George is the secretary. So that night was about South Philly's win was for them, but you had kind of a double. It was good in two ways, I guess, right?
That's a win.
Yeah, well, I mean, I went with Woodland and my whole heart out. I feel glad for the guys in South Philly, and they did a phenomenal job. They were really good. Danny did a tremendous job. I'm there with George. I'm happy for all them guys in South Philly. We just need to work harder and put a nice product out, and we'll be there.
That's great. That's the attitude to have. So we're going to say thank you so much to the Balzers, to the two Georges for joining us tonight. Why?
No. There's so much more to talk to them about. We don't have time on the tape.
No, our clock is ticking down.
Right.
We still have two more segments to do for the
George,
show.
this is for you, Georgie, right here.
Yeah, make sure you tip it back, maybe to the side a little bit if you can.
George the Third, I love you. You're a great guy.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you
for having us.
So that was a really wonderful chat with the Balzers, and hats off to you, Ron. George is someone who is really one of the unsung heroes in bands. He's done so much, without really getting, I would say, a lot of credit, wouldn't you say, for what he's done?
Absolutely.
For sure. So it is our custom to showcase a few other performances that fit our island hopping theme. So let's take a couple of other trips to Hawaii with these clips from some other island hopping performances that are some of our favorites.
Before we go, we wanted to wish everyone a very happy, healthy, and safe Thanksgiving. There's actually only one band in 120 years to do a Thanksgiving-oriented theme. So we thought we'd show you that tonight. It's the Broomall String Band in 2006, performance of Pilgrims and How.
Yeah, Ron, God bless Ron. Ron brought that to my attention. I got to tell you, if it was on a string band trivia night, I'm getting a big fat goose egg because I don't think I would have guessed that any band had ever done a Thanksgiving theme. So how appropriate that Ron found it, and we get to use that. And now it's memorialized in our Stringing Along show. So once again, we just want to, reach out to everyone and say, we hope that you will remember to support our sponsor, the Kitchen Conciliary Cafe in Collingswood, New Jersey. And make your reservations. You won't be disappointed, we promise you. So as we indicated, if you were watching from the beginning tonight, or whenever you're watching this, a random winner is going to be selected from among the first 20 viewers. Here's what you need to do. You need to enter a comment, whatever your comment is, any comment about tonight's show. You need to go to my company's Facebook page, the Sir James Productions Facebook page. You need to go there. If you don't want to do that, you can also send an email with your comment to sirjames2505@yahoo.com. And we will get the first 20 to come through in either place. And we will randomly select one winner from those, and we will reach out to you and we will let you know that you've won. So with that, we say so long from another episode of Stringing Along, echoing Ron's wish that you have a very happy Thanksgiving, a healthy and safe Thanksgiving. And we will be taking a week off next week for Thanksgiving, but we will be back in 2 weeks with episode 6 of Stringing Along, and we hope you'll be joining us. Good night, everybody.
Take care.